Hello everybody, welcome back to the Apex to Apex podcast with your host me Stanley Jones, where we discuss all things Formula 1 and MotoGP. However, they are now on their summer break, Formula 1 and MotoGP, both of them. So it invites more time for live streams, invites more time for more podcast episodes maybe throughout these next few weeks, as MotoGP doesn't return till 2 weeks time in Silverstone in early August. However, this episode is going to be about the Hungarian Grand Prix review, which saw Lando Norris secure his first win of the season and McLaren's first win of the season, and it was a race that I actually seemed to enjoy, purely because energy and harvesting wasn't really that much of a factor at the track layout in Hungary, and add that in with strategy, and you got a wonderful mix of what Formula 1 has been missing really all season. Again, for anyone wondering where my eyes are looking when I'm talking, because they can dart anywhere, I have my laptop here with me on it, which is uncomfortable. I've got some things on this screen, which has some things I need to say. And on the screen above me, I've got a Tottenham friendly game on because I saw it was on. And I was like, okay, let's stick that on in the background and then get prepared for the football season to start yet again. However, we're not going to talk about football season. We're going to talk about Lando Norris from pole to win and his first win of the season, his first win as world champion, and McLaren's first win of the season. It was a measured win. It was a measured win. His pace was superb from the start of the weekend to the end. Pole position, as we said, and race win, dominant. It was in a dominant way when you see that he ended up winning by 15 seconds to Max Verstappen, who's somehow finished second in a dollar Red Bull. But we'll get into that later on. Norris did make a couple of mistakes along the way, especially lap 1, turn 2. He ran wide at turn 2 a couple of times, and once at turn 4 when he actually went off the track. But the running wide at turn 2 on lap 1 gave Piastri the lead over him for that early part of the race. And Piastri, you could tell Norris had more pace. Norris was going on the radio saying he could pull 10 seconds if he needed to, but he's stuck in the dirty air, which was true, because he did end up doing that. We'll go into what happened to Piastri after and why he ended up conking out of the race. But it was a measured display from Norris. It was the first time we've really seen him have that superior pace over everyone throughout the whole weekend, throughout qualifying, especially at the end where he really turned it up, and throughout the race where he was calm. There was a bit on the radio where his team asked him, are they going to allow Hamilton to undercut them to make their strategy work? And Norris was like, what's his lap time? I think they said 24.7, could be a 24.2 or something like that. I don't really remember the numbers. And Norris just went, yeah, it's fine. I'll get him back easily. The one problem he had was dirty air, and he was stuck behind Piastri for a long period of the first part of the race because he couldn't get closer than 6 tenths, because the dirty air played a really big effect with the temperatures and the layout, as he said, of Hungary anyway, especially that middle sector. So he was stuck behind Piastri. But then certain things happened to Piastri with a backmarker, which cost Piastri the crucial seconds, which allowed Norris to overcut him and get back in the lead. And once Norris got in the lead and Piastri conked out of the race, even if Piastri didn't conk out in the race, he wasn't going to catch Norris. Norris, once he was in that lead, no one was going to catch him. And as I said, he scored his first win of the season in brutal fashion. By brutal fashion, I mean it controlled, measured. Despite a couple of mistakes, he could still pull 15 seconds out to the second place. And I think even if Piastri stayed in the race, the gap still would have been about 15 seconds if Norris wanted it to. That's how superior his pace was and his performance was in the weekend. Now, I've mentioned Piastri multiple times, and I'll say now, the main thing that happened with Piastri was, one, he just didn't have the pace as Norris. He led for a large part of the first half of the race because of Norris's mistake, and he had Norris kind of trapped in his dirty air, which was working for Piastri. First stop, it came back out, he stayed ahead of Norris. After that, misfortune kind of struck, because Norris was able to stay within a second, which already mentally is a tell to Piastri that Norris is quicker than him, so Piastri's going to have to do some defending later on in the race. He then came up to lap Carlos Sainz coming out of turn 2. And at this point, Carlos Sainz is fighting Alonso for I think it might have been last, I don't remember the position. And as they came out of turn 2 into turn 3, the blue flag system wasn't working. We're going to go into this next, but I think it's absolute farce why it wasn't working. And apparently we can't use manual blue flags anymore because we've lost our ability to be a smart human. And Sainz came left, cut off Piastri. They made contact, Piastri's front right to Sainz's rear left. That put Piastri, one, to back off to them and make more contact, but it also put Piastri on the grass, so they had to have a big oversteer moment into turn 3. That, I think, cost Piastri 45 seconds that entire lap, which was the perfect amount of time to put Norris at least a second and a half clear of him once Norris did the second pit stop. Add in that with Piastri, but when the Sky commentary didn't even pick up the contact initially, it was on the box on the left-hand side. I don't know how they didn't see it live. But add in that with Piastri, with the effect of he's already frustrated because yes, his team pitted him first, which was correct because even Norris on the radio was saying he wants to pit first, he's quicker. McLaren had the thing where the leading car will pit first. They pitted Piastri first, but they pitted him in the second time into traffic, which made him come up to these backmarkers and this incident happened. So he had both the frustrations. He's lost the lead. Now his pace has really dropped after this. I think his mind kind of checked out a bit because all the things happening against him, it's hard to bounce back from that. And then his gearbox conked out and said exit stage left. So that was Piastri's race done. No points for him. But on the other side of the McLaren garage, 25 points, and a deserved 25 points for Lando Norris. One thing I said I'd mention is, and it's what I called the blue flag farce, and that the fact that a lot of drivers complain about the backmarkers because then the blue flag's not giving it, and I'm surprised more penalties weren't dished out to drivers because of what was happening. You had an incident with, it caused some funny team radios, because you had Max call the RB boys, being Lawson and Lindblad, just shout at them morons because they wouldn't get out of the way. Antonelli had an issue with Bortoletto in middle sector. Obviously Piastri had his incident with Sainz, and it came out that the blue flag system was malfunctioning throughout the race, and so was the timing screen. But then that makes me beg again the human question of, do we rely too much on technology, especially in Formula 1? And the only answer to that is yes, we do, because it seems like we're now incapable of just doing manual blue flags like we used to do back in the day, which worked for years, and now apparently we don't have to do that no longer. And the engineers, I don't think, were focused enough on what was happening on track, because they're looking at their screens all the time to let the driver know you're getting lapped, get out of the way. Again, like they used to do back in the old days. By the old days, I mean 15, 20 years ago. It's not exactly, a different lifetime. And it showed when the system fails, there's not a good enough recovery from this. Like, we're talking about blue flags, really one of the easiest things to do in motorsport. When you're being lapped, you wave a blue flag, you see the blue flag, you get told who the driver is, and you move out the way. If the LED system isn't working, it's shocking enough that the blue flag system wasn't working anyway, considering how vital it is nowadays. To have this go down during the race really isn't good enough for Formula 1, and it's another issue with technology. It's another issue with Formula 1 not doing the simple things they need to be getting right. However, it calls for some entertainment if you're laughing at the drivers getting frustrated, because that's what happened a lot. I wouldn't be laughing if I was Piastri before the breakdown, if I happened to him, to effectively what cost him the lead of the race. I would also be spitting blood if I was in his helmet. Now we'll talk about who I thought was driver of the day, and also put in move of the day in what frankly is the dog of a car, and it's Max Verstappen. And it was a second place in a car that even he doesn't know how he got second place in. He's nowhere near the pace of Norris. Norris's pace was superb more than anyone. No one was getting near Lando Norris. But Verstappen spun in qualifying, which left him down his sixth. He spun in the last corner because instead of having tyre deg, he said he had car deg. And aerodynamically, the Red Bull just wears and gets worse and worse, seemingly as the laps go on. Especially on curbs. I think he had some damage on the curb, which has made the Red Bull unstable to drive yet again. So he started fourth in the end because of penalties for impeding with Hamilton. I think Antonelli's was also impeding. Hamilton's was clear as day with Piastri. I can't quite remember what Antonelli's was. It might have been impeding. So he started in fourth, and he was third after coming out of turn one as he pipped the Ferrari in front of him. So he was fourth at the start, then he was third in the turn one after a good start, following the two McLarens. It was evident early on that his pace was good. His pace was very good considering the car he's driving. But his pace wasn't the pace of Norris. He maybe could have stuck with Piastri, because Piastri's pace was actually closer to Verstappen's than it was to Norris. That's how far off his teammate he was. Oh, Tottenham referee on goal. Oh, we get the bar. Anyway, moving on. What I will say is Max did do move of the race to get Lewis Hamilton. So Red Bull did do a little mess of their strategy again. Some weird decisions, including a 28-lap stint on the softs, which we'll get to at the end. But he found himself being undercut by Hamilton because Red Bull just stayed out too long. Well, no, the first stop actually was Red Bull looked to go long initially, and then decided to react to Hamilton's early pit stop. Hamilton started on softs, as did Leclerc. And they reacted to his pit stop, kind of sacrificing that first stint, which was odd. And then the second stint, after that, they did get undercut by Hamilton, which was odd. And I think it was lap 16 on that. They come out the last corner. I think Lawson did hold up Hamilton a bit in the last sector, but again, this is this blue flag argument that we can no longer wave a blue flag manually because humans have lost the ability to use their brain and can't work without the aid of technology. Anyway, Hamilton's lapped Lawson down the main straight, and Verstappen pulls to the right to lap Lawson as well down this same straight. And he comes from so far back, almost Narnia-type levels lunge, down the inside of Hamilton into turn one. It's a perfect move, and it's a beautiful move. And it's the way, if you're going to look at an overtake, how to be late on the brakes in any Formula 1 car, in any era, it's this way. There's no lockups, no contact, did it perfectly, and caught Hamilton sleeping, which was the main goal. And Verstappen said afterwards, to him it felt like it was his only chance to be able to make this move, and he did it perfectly. He did go on the radio and say he doesn't want to complain, but that was moving under braking. He goes, it's good action, but it's not right, and he's correct. I like hard racing, I like aggressive racing. That little move, I think, there's a line, but that was on the limit, but allowed. I did the same thing in that position. What I didn't like was the fact there was no replay, and I guarantee you, if this was the other way round, and yes, I'm saying it again, I'm proving my point again, certain passports in Formula 1 have certain advantages, depending on also what broadcast you watch as well. It was clear, I watched it again afterwards, and it was very clear that he caught Hamilton off guard, yes, on the braking, And Hamilton does move right like that under braking, clear as day. And if that was swapped the other way round, and you had Verstappen defending, or not defending, got caught off guard, and Hamilton lands down the inside, and Verstappen moved like that under braking as much as Hamilton did, the reaction and the outpouring would have been completely different. It would have been a disaster for Verstappen. It would have been, oh, he tried to kill Hamilton. The media would have been on in, the drivers would have been on, the journalists would have had a field day of it, so would a Sky F1. And I was watching it and I was like, I find it very, very interesting how no replay was shown of this move. Especially considering how good the move was. We're only seeing the replays now afterwards on the onboard or on the Instagram reels, not on the live broadcast, which to me is very, very odd. However, that secured in front of Hamilton. Hamilton couldn't really reply to Verstappen after that because his pace was just superior. And then Red Bull again made a weird decision to put Verstappen on a 28-lap stint on the soft tyres at the end, which is even more odd considering the pace of that car in general isn't very good. Verstappen eased the tyres in wonderfully. He did exactly what he needed to do. The tyres still had a life at the end. The VSC helped, I think, defending from Antonelli, who at this point in the race was on just new hard tyres and could push like crazy on these hard tyres because they were going to make the end. And the VSC helped kind of reduce that gap, but Verstappen stayed ahead, I think, by 3.5 seconds in the end to secure second. One thing I will say, and you can love me or this or hate me for this, just like people love Verstappen and hate him, Formula 1 as a sport and as an entertainment need Max Verstappen. Again, love him or hate him, he's the one who makes the show at the minute. When there's, not at the minute, it's only for years, when there's racing that needs excitement and you need a clip and you need to remember something from the race, it will come from Max Verstappen. End of debate on that one. And I would actually debate anyone happily who tries to have a different angle, because I'm interested to know why the different angle is coming from or where the different angle is coming from. But Formula 1 without Max Verstappen in it is a dire watch and a dire sport, and it's a much worse off place with him, without him, and it's a much worse off place without Max Verstappen than it is with Max Verstappen. Formula 1 needs Max Verstappen. End of. I did speak about Antonelli. Again, he had the penalty for qualifying, dropped back down. Was actually quite quiet in the race, and Mercedes were on kind of like the opposite strategy to everyone, which meant Antonelli could push on the hard tyres at the end. You might be asking what happened to his teammate George Russell. Well, as I said, Antonelli finished third. George Russell finished down in seventh. Now, why he was in seventh when he was at the top five? I think it was third in qualifying or maybe fifth in qualifying. I don't quite remember again. Lights out happened, and Russell goes into anti-stall. Antonelli said in the cooldown room he thinks it's because he hit the top of the pack of the charge and he had no battery, but then you watch the onboard and he went into anti-stall, which dropped him right to the very back of the field coming out of turn one. He had to wake his way through. It was obvious he was going to get seventh because of the superior pace of the Mercedes compared to the backmarker cars, the midfield cars, and he did secure seventh. Only 2 seconds behind Hadjar in the end because Hadjar really struggled with his Red Bull. But that really put an end to Russell's day, and it carries on Russell's misfortunes and Russell's luck and Russell's performances at the same time, because I haven't really been anywhere near the par of Antonelli. And that Mercedes intra-team dynamic is clearly Antonelli's the lead driver now in the team. He's clearly the fastest driver right now, and Russell is struggling right now to not just catch up with Antonelli, to bridge that gap between himself and Antonelli, because he's at the minute he's unable to put in a consistent weekend, whereas Antonelli can put it in. He wasn't the quickest this weekend, was Antonelli, but even without the grid penalty, Antonelli would have been probably second ahead of Max Verstappen. Whereas would Russell have had the pace to beat him in the race? You don't know, because Russell, he was unfortunate in qualifying because Verstappen's spin brought out the yellow flags, which meant Russell to back off his lap. Again, there's a whole yellow flag debate, how much can you lift in it, which was introduced because of George Russell in Austria, but the anti-stall has not helped Russell's cause in any way, shape or form with his future Mercedes seat, considering yet again Antonelli was on the podium. So yet again Antonelli's picked up 15 points, Russell secured just 6, which again builds the gap between the two Mercedes drivers in the driver's standings. Remember, Russell is no longer second in the standings. That goes back to Lewis Hamilton, who is now 50 points behind. So he's lost a step in that title fight. But they're kind of keeping Antonelli on their toes, because we've seen, look at Piastri breaking down, that Mercedes PU, despite being, frankly, it is the best in the grid. That's quite obvious. I'm going to ignore the ADOU rulings. It's quite obvious that Mercedes has the best engine in general. But it's also sensitive. It is proving to be quite unreliable. I think every weekend right now we're getting a Mercedes PU going, which also makes it a bit more fascinating to watch when you see Mercedes dominating, because you can never quite tell which one of them is going to conk out. This time it was Piastri, but we've seen over the last 6 races, it's been Piastri, it's been Norris, it's been Russell, it's been Antonelli. Oh, Tottenham conceded. Joy. Okay. Who are we playing? Anyway, of course, away from the leading packs, there was the other drivers who we always speak about and see who grabs headlines in a car, in a midfield fight, in a backmarker fight when no one's really watching. I mentioned last race that Nico Hülkenberg has yet to score a point for Audi this season, which surprised me. I'm a big fan of Nico Hülkenberg. I think he's very talented, always has been, and just has always the bad luck of the green. Since he joined Formula 1, it's always been that way. However, he did secure 9th place in the Grand Prix, securing his first points of the season with Audi, 2 points as well. He had a good scrap with both RB cars, Lawson and Lindblad. Lindblad, who tried to one-stop, I think, again the whole time. He did 40-odd laps on the hard tyre, so it was clear what they were trying. And again, Lawson and Lindblad were close to each other on track, as they seem to always be at the minute. They used to always be near each other. I seem to talk about them every podcast we do, because they're impressing me, and they continue to impress me. Lawson doesn't deserve to lose a seat to Solov if that does happen. I hope not. Solov, yes, deserves a seat, but not in place of Lawson. And Lindblad is proving to be a very good rookie in his first year of Formula 1. Hülkenberg was clean throughout. 9th place Hülkenberg, as we said, that's 2 points for him. The biggest improvements this weekend was actually from Aston Martin, who finally bought effectively their B-spec car. They bought 16 upgrades to the Hungarian Grand Prix weekend. The whole car was different, turned upside down by Adrian Newey, who finally, it's the first time he's really seeing all the parts on the car were from Newey, because remember he was on gardening leave before, so he couldn't really have that much effect on all the angles of the car he wanted to. Now he has, and did it improve? Well, yes, because Fernando Alonso for the first time this season got out of Q2, which is a major step for Aston Martin, considering that before they were 2 seconds off, doing that 2.5 seconds off, getting out of Q2 alone before the Hungarian Grand Prix weekend. The thing is, for me, is they're now clearly ahead of Williams, who have been severely embarrassing really this year when you consider James Vowles went on so much last year, speaking how much the focus is going on the 2026 car, and they've made an overweight dog, is what they've done, and the drivers can't drive it. Sainz is too busy clashing while getting lapped. Albon's getting annoyed on the radio every weekend, and Williams have massively gone backwards over the last couple this year compared to the last couple of seasons, and Aston Martin is now firmly ahead of them on pace as well. They didn't score any points in the end, but they did finish 13th and 14th, only 1 lap down, which is huge for Aston Martin. And it was actually Lance Stroll beat Fernando Alonso, so Stroll 13th, Alonso 14th. I don't know what, I think they did some weird strategy as well to try and, they're still figuring things out on the car, what they can do, what they can't do. But it's huge for Aston Martin, considering the ones behind them, so I'm looking at Colapinto is behind them, 2 laps down, Ocon behind them, both Williams behind them, Behrman behind them, and then you have to retire, of course both Cadillacs retired again with 1 brake issue. It was funny watching Bottas actually skirt against the wall to try and stop the car, because again the brakes were not working. But that's a major step forward for Aston Martin, and of course it is. It's Adrian Newey designing the pieces. Every piece they're going to put on the car now is going to put the Aston Martin forward. The question is, Honda, as in the manufacturer, the engine manufacturer, need to make the same leaps and jumps as what Newey's going to do with the car itself and the chassis itself. I think the rumour is Honda is still about a second and a half down on power compared to the best engine, but their next upgrade could bring about half a second. We hope so. Just to, I'm an Alonso fan as well, so I'd like to see Alonso back in there. I don't know if Stroll's going to do anything in the car, but that's Lance Stroll, who now I think was it his 200th race weekend for Lance Stroll, and I saw that only 24 drivers have achieved that, and Lance Stroll's one of them, which is extremely odd. But okay, fine. One thing I will say, because really that's a short race review, despite it being an entertaining race, away from the front runners, away from Norris, away from the wonders that Verstappen was doing, away from what Hamilton did as well with his penalties. If I didn't realise, it was Hamilton was speeding in the pit lane, which caused his 5-second penalty, which dropped it down to 5th in the end behind his teammate Leclerc, even though Hamilton did cross the line in 4th just behind Antonelli. And that's 4 or 5 penalties in the last 4 race weekends for Hamilton now. He said something like he's given every opportunity they have to give him penalty issues to doing so, and I'm kind of like, well, stop breaking the law then in Formula 1, and then you'll stop getting penalties. Anyway, I diverse, because I was going to speak about one thing I enjoyed a lot, actually, from the race weekend, and especially on the Sunday, which I found even more interesting. I saw this more on the race than the other sessions, was the art of different lines, and the different lines all the drivers are taking, especially through the last corner and the first 2 corners. Now, I'm a nerd, so I can always spot when a driver does something on the steering wheel, when a driver does something with his driving technique. My brain always latches onto that and finds it very interesting how each driver has their own unique way of doing things in the car. And one thing I saw, normally I'm used to over the years, them hugging that inside line at the last corner, but you're seeing different ones. Norris was always going an outside line at the entry, and Hamilton started doing the hug on at the start and then did the same line as Norris, always doing the wide line on the entry to cut on the exit to get that advantage going onto the straight and sacrificing the entry. That I found interesting, because Verstappen in the end was doing like a handbrake. Obviously, Mark Marquez do it on MotoGP. Doing a handbrake turn, effectively, where you kind of V-shape the line to get out there. And it's so strange in these cars that they're able to do that. Just like the chicane. It's strange, not a bad strange. It's good. I like seeing drivers do that. Same with turn 1. All drivers have a different line for turn 1. Do they sacrifice the entry for the exit, or are they sacrificing the exit just to get that little tight line on entry and feel the grip mid-corner? Most of them in turn 1 were trying to do the sacrificing the entry for the exit because you need that run. Again, Verstappen was doing the sim racer line of just going wide on entry, sacrificing the apex mid-corner, and being able to carry the speed through wide on exit as well. But then you go turn 2, downhill. Do you hold the tight line, which a lot of them are doing, or do you do all the way around the outside, which Norris was trying a lot? I don't know if he was making a mistake, but he tried it he stopped trying it after he ran wide, so he was deliberately doing it early on in the race, was Norris. But then he had a point when he was following Piastri, and a dirty air also got him, where it was the same mistake he made at turn 2, on lap 1, where he just ran wide, and as soon as you get on the marble and the dirt, the car's going to drag you wide anyway. So there are a lot of lines in turn 2 being very similar. And I find it fascinating how even on... you're used to seeing it on the Friday, then you see really in qualifying what lines drivers are committing to. Seeing it that much to me on the Sunday I found fascinating. And I also liked, in the middle sector where that tight chicane is, we haven't seen drivers be able to abuse the curbs for a long time in F1 because of the ground effect here, where you couldn't really do that because you'll unsettle the car too much. The cars are too stiff and too low, and a lot of the aero came from the floor, so if the car's bounced like this, you're going to lose out on a lot of aero. But then I noticed in this chicane, drivers were really abusing, not the first part of the curb, the second part of the curb, almost having half the car over the curb, letting it bounce over, which for me was good to see. There was a move with Ocon and Bortoleto, where Bortoleto got him on the exit of the chicane, he get quickly into the left-hander, and he had that much of a speed advantage because he hit that curb perfectly. That Ocon on the radio said, I think he cut the chicane. He didn't cut the chicane. The bounce on the curb was that perfect. He had that advantage on the exit. And I love seeing that. I haven't seen that for a very long time in Formula 1. I haven't seen that where it really... my brain latches on to watch where they gain the speed, but also why they're making these decisions. Some cars obviously suit some lines better than others. They were all using that curb, but you had the McLarens opting for the wider entry for the tighter exit for the speed. You had Max and the Red Bull doing wide at both to really just carry the speed through. And you had the Ferraris, who I don't think the Ferrari could decide what line it really wanted throughout the entire race. Now, you don't really see them review this sort of thing post-race on the broadcast you watch. It'd be great if they did, but I also like doing, that's fine. I also like doing my own little review of what's happening on the screen after the races. I don't need them to listen to them to tell me what's happening. I know already. But I enjoyed that, and I think it's the first... I wanted to see that in these cars, and it's the first time I've really been able to, I think, while enjoying the race. Of course, this has probably been happening throughout the season quite more often, but because I've been such a depressive lull about Formula 1 this year, I haven't been able to actually focus and enjoy the racing. This one, because I enjoyed the race, my brain was suddenly alive again and aware and focusing on what's happening, all these nerdy things. I also like where the boost button is for some drivers. A lot of them have it behind the right toggle, on the right at the back of the steering wheel on the right hand side. A lot of them have the radio button as a left button on the left. I know Red Bull have it on the left side. McLaren have it bottom left as well. Things like that interest me, and when I'm enjoying F1, I'll notice things like that as well. I'm a nerd. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to say? But just touching on the main things of this podcast. It's going to be a shorter one today because, summer break. We can all enjoy some time off now away from Formula 1, I think. But it staggered me, the level of incompetence when it came to this blue flag system failing. One, that should never happen. Two, it did. And clearly there's no backup plan. We just all forgot that we used to do manual blue flags when you actually have to physically wave a flag. Staggering thought, isn't it? But that also, in turn, the other angle of this was it did provide some entertainment. As I said, if you like watching drivers complain, like a lot of people do, and if you like, it was interesting to watch when the backmarker was holding a driver up. You had this train of cars behind them, which always makes for fun racing, especially down the straight into a heavy braking zone, and that kind of went on the entire Grand Prix, effectively. Of course, I was just having a think there if there's any breaking news happening in Formula 1. And there's one which is a funny one and a weird... Oh, Tottenham messed up in tech. Anyway, I'll carry on. A funny one and a weird one. That the good news is Malaysia is coming back on the calendar this year. Now, the Malaysia Grand Prix is a very good track, and it was a shame when it came off the calendar after 2017. I think Verstappen won the last race day, his second race win at the time. It's a track that's perfect for Formula 1 cars, and it's a shame that Formula 1 raised their price that high, Malaysia couldn't pay it or didn't want to pay it. It's back this year in Canada, it's been announced. But it's going to be running as the Bahrain Grand Prix in Malaysia, in Sepang, which is odd. I mean, it's understandable why they're not racing in Bahrain this season, for valid reasons. I think we all know the reasons why. And the correct move has been done to not race there, not even try and race there. We're not even trying to entertain that. I don't know why we're still calling it the Bahrain Grand Prix. I haven't read into why. I think it's going to be very funny, and there's going to be plenty of jokes for it being called the Bahrain Grand Prix in Malaysia, if that's going to be the title for it. But I am happy to see Malaysia back. One thing I'll say, right, because I wanted to publicly call them, It's Race Talk F1. But if you don't follow their podcast, firstly follow it, because they're two people I know very well. They're building this platform, and they're doing a hell of a job building it as well. And I watched their posts, and again, because I know them well, I like to do a little comment every now and again, because I'm a little shite. I saw their post recently about the McLaren fight. We mentioned it earlier in this podcast with Piastri and Norris, when Norris wanted to put on the radio, and they said they can't, because again, McLaren have this weird routine where the leading car will pit. And the post they made was, I believe they should have let Norris pit and let Piastri go on with what he was doing. And I when I saw that clip, right, I saw it earlier today, literally, and I sat there and I thought, I would love to know why they thought McLaren would allow Norris to do that. Because in terms, what McLaren try and do, and they make a mess of it every time, is they try and not do preferential treatment, even though they prefer Lando Norris, is the fact. But they try and not publicly make it preferential treatment. So by Norris came into one pit, by saying they're not allowed, they were publicly defending their other driver, Piastri. Okay, wicked, fine. I think Piastri at this point already said he's got no more pace, and it was very obvious that he had no more pace. In my opinion, they did the right thing of not pitting Norris when he wanted to, because Norris, if there's a leading car and they have this rule, you cannot then go against it and pit the car behind, because that's going to anger the driver in front. What the mistake McLaren did make is when they brought Piastri in this situation, take away the Sainz incident, take away everything else. When they brought Piastri in, Tottenham's Mr. Sitter, Piastri didn't have the pace anyway. It was obvious, and I don't know if when Piastri pitted, if it was his call to pit, or McLaren brought him in early, or it was the scheduled call. I think it was the scheduled one, because just before there was an incident before Piastri to pit later on because Bottas was blocking the pit entry because he had no brakes, so Piastri ran again. But I think both stops for Piastri were planned. McLaren's problem is they let Piastri do their normal plan, but they're doing so. They then secretly changed Norris's plan and Norris's schedule to go longer, which in turn, yes, the Sainz incident helped Piastri, but even without the Sainz incident, Piastri was still going to be damaged by that, because Norris was still going to have the benefit because he went longer, because he had the pace to, if that makes sense. So yes, the argument is they still favoured Norris in some way over Piastri, but then this is racing we're on about. Norris had superior pace over Piastri, and the only way where Piastri can respond to this is not get annoyed at the strategy, is to match the pace of his teammate. So I think the call of let Piastri carry on doing it, and if Norris was the pit Norris, no, because that goes against the whole strategy meeting, that goes against what was agreed. You have to remember, before every race there's going to be an agreement of what the strategy is for both drivers, and both drivers work with each other and around the plan to make this agreement work. So when Norris goes to pit, he's behind Piastri. By allowing that, if they did, McLaren are effectively showing Piastri where the door is. I do feel like in a way they're kind of doing that anyway, slowly, because Piastri's not matched the pace of Norris this season. But it was interesting to me to watch how over the next 10 laps, despite not pitting Norris first, McLaren secretly and quietly put Norris in a better position. This is excluding the Sainz incident. They quietly moved Norris's chest piece into a better position, because they already knew if Norris goes longer, he's going to come out ahead of Piastri anyway, or pass Piastri on track. What they didn't want to do, actually, was them to come wheel to wheel on track. They would have rather Norris done Piastri the pits, like it did happen. Sainz, helped that case happen. But their worst nightmare is them coming together on track and going wheel to wheel. So I don't think there was someone in McLaren disappointed that keeping Norris out for longer actually benefited him in the long run. And yes, I'm going to call Race Talk out F1. Not call them out, I take it back. I'm going to respond to their thing, because I found it an interesting point they made. Anyway, that would be the end of this podcast, purely because I go to work. I edit this and go to work, because I also have a job, which is funny. For once, there is no race weekend in this coming weekend. Formula 1 has just started its summer break, and they will return in a few weekends' time in Zandvoort, I believe. I'm just double checking it is the Dutch Grand Prix. And it is on the 21st to 23rd of August is when Formula 1 makes its return. So again, this weekend, empty. So expect maybe more podcasts this weekend or next week. Expect more streams this weekend on Twitch. Expect everything more, because we have time to do it. MotoGP, you might ask. MotoGP returns on the 9th of August in Silverstone. Now, there won't be a live stream for the Sunday in MotoGP or the Saturday that weekend, because I won't be here. Saturday I'll be away somewhere, and Sunday I'll actually be at Silverstone watching MotoGP itself. I advise anyone, I've managed to get a couple people who have never watched MotoGP live before, or who have only just started watching MotoGP this year. I love the fact that I've managed to get a couple more eyes on MotoGP for people I know around, or people I know of and people I know, because I always think MotoGP deserves that audience. And I've managed to get people to get tickets to watch MotoGP this coming next weekend. Sorry, in Silverstone, which to me makes me happy. I think the more hours of MotoGP, the better, because it deserves it. But they've got 1 week left of their summer break. So as I said, not much going on this weekend. Expect to stream this weekend, probably Saturday and Sunday, because we have time to sim race. I haven't decided what we're going to use yet, but there might be a sim race on Le Mans Ultimate, maybe the F1 game itself, maybe an extra podcast episode if I want to. It's up to me if I want to do it or not. But as we now focus for the next half of the season, the second half of both seasons, I'll say thank you for listening to this podcast. It's the end of this one as well. Thank you for tuning in, anyone who tuned into the race commentary watch along on Sunday on Twitch and for F1. And throughout the first half of the season, it's quite big for me to make this whole project, make the live streams, make the podcast. Thank you everyone who did tune in, followed, interacted on social medias, whichever. Make sure you follow this account, the Apex Rabbits pod page on Twitch, which is where again we live stream the races and some sim racing and some other things as well. Make sure you follow the actual podcast on Instagram and Spotify and YouTube. Apex Rabbits podcast, the handle for all three of those platforms. We are more active on Instagram, from mainly clips from the Twitch streams as well. But again, if you're not followed, subscribe, make sure you do to all the platforms, all the handles, they are below in the screen. And I'll leave you as we usually do at the end of the episode, which is with the punchline, which is the race is just a punctuation. I'll see you again very soon. Thank you.